I want to now explore some possible designs. I've done the research and I've got in my mind two real possibilities. So the first thing we do, I just sort of roughly map out the dimensions of the board, which he could have both his arms open, which I quite like. It creates a nice sort of movement here with the St. John Vianney at the centre, like that. I mean, it could be very subtle and sort of a little design on the stole, or it could be Our Lady holding the seminary, for example. Something like that. Here, the movement is sort of swooping up there and then sweeping there. So that gives a nice sort of arrow shape coming up there. This one is the priest giving praise, really the priesthood of John Vianney, which is offering up thanks and praise to God. And I quite like that with Our Lady sort of holding this here. Another possible one would be to have him stood as a full figure, like this, and then sort of in his priestly vestments again. And then with some sheep. So very much the Good Shepherd. And I must admit, I do quite like this idea, because John Vianney, as patron of parish of all priests, not just parish priests, is very much about the good pastor, and Pope Benedict's letters associated with the elevation of Curidar as a little bit more like that, and then with maybe Our Lady and Saint Philomena in two little roundels like this. That's another possible one. It's a very, very big church, and this isn't a very big icon. So trying to think how that's going to work as an object for prayer and inspiration. I mean, very much, I think I want to sort of capture John Vianney looking after the potential priests of the future who are training in this seminary, setting an example for them, but also the person who is praying for them and walking with them and guiding them. So there's something maybe to be said for this image, and then it could have something about the paradise leading the sheep to heaven, maybe with a black sheep down here. Good shepherd. Something like this. So here we have some little rough sketches which I've been working on as possible ways of designing this icon. So let me have a look at these and take you through what the ideas are. First of all, you'll see I mocked up using Affinity the layout, and all I've done is reproduced this 4 times in miniature, and then I just put a piece of drafting paper over the top, and that's roughly about there, like this. So we can see the proportions, and I've designed into the space. So 4 different designs, but based around a similar posture. And what I really wanted to do was to capture the idea of St. John Marie Vianney's priestly identity at the heart of those who are aspiring to be priests, their formation, so that he becomes a friend, an accompanier, a patron, an inspiration, and a guide. The essence of the priestly identity, or the highest form of it, is when he offers the Mass. So here we see John Marie in priestly vestments. So I decided to put him in a chasuble rather than in his stole. I didn't want to focus so much on his role as a confessor, because as a confessor, he was extraordinary. He wasn't just a really, really good confessor. He was possessed of a really special charism and gift of being able to read souls. And that's not something that is given to every priest. That was very particular to his charism as an individual. Rather, the example that the church holds before us is St. John Vianney as a typical priest, as somebody who embodies that charism which is universal in the life of the church. And the Mass is the culmination, the highest moment of a priest's work. So here he is in a posture of celebrating Mass. His hands open in the orans position, the prayerful position, and not necessarily celebrating the Mass. I've not got him at an altar with a sort of snapshot moment of celebrating the Mass, but stood as one who prays before God as a priest. So he's in the vestments of the Mass, in the posture of offering, but he stands as a priest in the midst of creation. So his whole life, his whole charism is to offer to God that which is of the cosmos. And what I really wanted to focus on was the seminary as a place of pastoral formation and the formation of pastors. So the idea of John Vianney as the ultimate shepherd, the pastor of the sheep. And the image that really inspired me here was from a very, very early mosaic. If I bring up my craft program, this is where I organize all my notes. And you can see that here, under the title Saint Jean-Marie Vianney, I've collected a whole series of resources. And here is this image, which was the first thing that really sort of came to my mind, the sort of inspiration. I sort of keep going back to it, of Saint Apollinarius here as a bishop, but dressed in the chasuble and alb of the one who celebrates Mass, with the sheep. Obviously, the bishop is the chief shepherd of the flock, successor of the apostles, and quite often in these early Byzantine mosaics, the apostles are represented as sheep. Now, for this design, I'm using the pastoral imagery of the Good Shepherd, which the priest is modelled, and seeing the seminarians as the sheep modelling themselves on the Good Shepherd of the Cura Hidar. So this image came to my mind very early on, and I couldn't quite understand how to weave it all together. But as I've been exploring things, it's come back into focus. And so here, as well as having the sheep, I also want to have some of these flowers and plants of paradise, so that it resonates with that. Now, one possibility, if I don't go with the large building, which can, I don't know, feel a little bit forced, and when it's so large, you know, what's it saying? It really just says building and seminary and John belonging there, which is all good. But does it really speak of heaven? And so an alternative would be to have the landscape as paradise, with some trees and so forth and budding flowers. So really John in the midst of paradise, but holding the seminary as its patron. But then we lose that wonderful gesture, that priestly gesture of offering the Mass. So I'm a little bit umming and ahhing about how to proceed with this. I like both the ideas. Both seem very strong. I can see positives for both of them. Now, so working with these little sketches gave me the opportunity to explore some ideas. And even in these little sketches, to get a sense of the presence. And I really like that gesture. It really sort of says something very important, I think, about John Vianney. So even though I like this paradise setting, I don't want to lose the Oran's position of the priest at the altar, because that's so integral to how I've come to understand Jean-Marie Vianney in my reflections. Having mulled those over, and here you can see what I've mocked up a design by using some photographs of that mosaic, Saint Apollinarium Classe. I sort of arranged it in proportion to the geometry, and positioned a couple of the sheep, and then thought about what sort of proportion to have for the building. So again, exploring this image time and time again, just mulling things over, trying things, see what resonates, what doesn't. And then I sat down and come up with this first sketch. Started by creating this model. to get the proportions right and the posture right. It's very easy when we're doing icon figures, because they are not naturalistic. We can easily get into a position where we deform the posture. And that is a problem in a lot of icons. So the proportions of the length of arms and legs to the head and to the rest of the body can be all over the place. Now, sometimes that's done deliberately. And when you're working from some ancient models, you can find figures of a ratio even 11 or 12 to 1 head height. But normally speaking, it's about 7.5 to 8. It's important to get these proportions right if you want your icon not to be distracting. One of the things that's important about posture is if you have a flat figure just straight like this, it's very aggressive. Straight on body, it's very static and there's no life to it. In classical Byzantine art, not just iconography, but art in general, we have to remember Byzantines saw the art of looking dynamically. We tend to think of looking as a sort of form of photography. You've got to trap a moment and freeze frame it. The Byzantines didn't think about looking in that way at all. For them, it was like you scanned a surface. And if you think, for example, here I've got a mug, and the way I look at this is as it moves, I can see inside it. I can see to the side where there's a handle. I can see underneath it where there's a flat base. And so in my looking is processing these objects in movement, in space. And it captures these elements as a moving whole. And if you look in the icon, you'll see that the perspective of buildings, for example, is multifaceted. It's as though you've got like a drone going around and up and over, and it's all sort of woven into the composition. So when we're looking at things in a Byzantine way, we're not trying to create a snapshot. It's not a photograph. It's a dynamic compilation of perspectives, and our eye is supposed to move over the surface constantly. So this is very important to remember when you're looking at models. Don't try to sort of crush them into a sort of very solid static state. Allow them and see and feel the movement in the composition. Because iconography minimalizes, the movement becomes incredibly important, and we often find that in the way in which garment folds accentuate this sense of movement. For example, if you look here, you see the way this garment is sweeping upwards, and in fact you can see the body there, almost a continuation of the sweep. So your eye is being dragged upwards and up along the leg, the knee, up to the hip, and then along the side of the thorax there. And I've used this as a reference point for this figure. So you can see the foot's turned here, the foot towards us here, the knee front to us here, and the arms like in this angle here. Now, actually, I'm a little bit, needed a bit of work on here to sort of refine this a bit. And I need to then sort of work out what's happening with the hands and where I need to put these. But as an initial composition, this I think has some merit to it. And you can see here I put the sheep down here. And one of the things I've learned from Matthew Paris is if you're going to have a lot of sort of energy with the folds and so forth, and this movement within the composition, you need to have some very strong verticality. The verticality in the figure, that central axis, So you see the nose and the mouth here, the centre of the vestment, the leg set against that central point. I'm echoing that with the angle of the sheet neck, so they're quite erect, and that creates a sort of solidity around which then things can move. Otherwise, what you can happen is you've got so much fluidity, the whole thing just becomes a soup.